All right, Tony, here's the next question. Why does my toilet keep running or clogging?
That's a great question, Daniel. So, a lot of people's toilets keep running because there's a small piece in the center of your tank bowl called a flapper. And usually those deteriorate, right? And so they deteriorate typically from chlorine in the water or chloramines in the water, and they deteriorate that rubber. Sometimes they're plastic or what have you, but the chemical composition of your water is typically what destroys most of your plumbing issues in your home, whether it be your faucets, your shower heads, your actual plumbing tubing, whether it be copper or what have you. Water deteriorates a lot of what we have. So with your running toilet, usually it's going to be from the flapper leaking into the tank of that the actual bowl of the toilet from the tank. And then you also are going to have the mechanism on most toilets to when you pull the top of it, you're going to have a mechanism to the left that rises with the water as it's coming into the tank, right? And sometimes those get stuck or hung up. Again, a sign of bad water in your home. Why we always tell people, look, you should have your water tested, right? But those are the two main causes, really the only causes for your toilets to be leaking, which would be number one, again, your flapper. Very easy to replace those. You really don't need a plumber to come out for those. We're happy to come out and do it. But really, all you're doing is you're taking two tabs off of the existing and you're putting them right back on. You're going to lose a little bit of water, but you're going to save a service call by doing that yourself as well. And then what we'll call the guts of the toilet, right, which is your fill valve, those, they're a little more complicated because you could have some water coming out because you'll notice that's where the toilet fills up from. So you'll have a line coming to the bottom of that fill valve, right? And so those can be a little tricky to change. And we definitely recommend having a plumber come out, assess the situation, take a look at it and see if you need new fill valves and replace all the internal parts of the toilet. A lot of people don't realize too, Daniel, that toilets get old and they need replacing. Oh, the porcelain in the bowl looks smooth, but believe it or not, over time, again, water is a deteriorating item. So it really can wreak havoc on your plumbing, especially when the water is not in good shape. We'll say it's not polished, right? So, toilets get old and eventually they do need to be replaced. Here at Ben Franklin, we do offer a 10-year warranty on our toilets, which means it's basically what I'll use to the car manufacturers. It's bumper to bumper with us. So if we're replacing the toilet, we're going to come back and replace all the guts, a flapper here or there, no extra service call. So
Now,
that's usually what you find.
I heard the tablets that you put into the tank actually will mess up or wear on your flappers faster. Is that true? The kind that, when you flush the toilet, it's all blue or green. Is that
Yeah.
something good because I want the smell to be better, or is that a bad thing?
Well, it just depends on the composition of that, right? So when we add a filter to a house, we're removing the chlorine and the chlorination, right? And so then what we'll see is that's older water and it allows growth to occur on your flapper, for instance. And sometimes that mildew that gets onto the flapper from not having chlorine to keep it clean now, you'll see that can also cause that. So we recommend using a borax tablet, right? It's not chlorine, but it also cleans. And so those are good to have. As far as the smell good, they're all going to say flapper safe. I would just tell you, to watch it, right? Like if you want that smell good thing, usually you can find one that you can tuck into the bowl of your toilet versus put one into the tank. But it's all of the chemical composition, right? We definitely recommend borax, especially if you have the filter taken out, the chlorine or the chloramines, because you are going to have some growth from algae and that kind of thing just because you don't have anything killing that anymore.
No, that makes sense. Thank you so much. What should I not put down my drains? That's a big one. Think about a lot of people put those flushable wipes or, pipe safe or whatever they say. Tell me more about
Yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah. Well, those flushable wipes are typically plumbers' best friends. In other words, they cause a lot of service calls because they are flushable wipes. And now they've got some cool brands out for guys now. I won't get into manufacturers' names, and man, hey, these are flushable. They're going to take any smells away. Don't put those in your sewer. Just do not flush them down. Throw them in the trash can. They are not good for your plumbing system because they hang up. Okay, so if there's for some reason a little burr somewhere down your pipes going to the utility, they snag on that, and guess what? Maybe those wipes really do deteriorate. But if it's not sitting in water to deteriorate and you don't continually have water all the time in your pipes, they're not deteriorating. They're catching more toilet paper coming down, creating the issue. So there is no such thing as a flushable wipe as far as plumbers are concerned. Do we love them? Yes, because we get to come back and clear those clogs out. So definitely don't use those. Use a trash can for those. And I think you had what was the other part of that question?
Yeah, it's like so yeah, what should I not put down my drains? That's just one of many, I'm
Yes.
sure.
And here's another thing. A lot of people feel like, hey, man, I've got a great garbage disposal, and we highly recommend those. But those are really for just the bits and pieces that would go into a drain, right? Like you didn't get a bean or two off of the plate when you scrape them into the trash, which is highly recommended. Scrape your plates before you put them in there. I will tell you another tip too, and it blows my wife's mind. If we fry something in a frying pan, like and there's any kind of oil in it, when the pan cools off, I'm taking a paper towel or two, and I'm rubbing that grease out of that pan so that when I am cleaning the pan with the hot water, look, it's just a small step to eliminate having somebody come out and clean my pipes of grease, right? So, don't put grease down. I've heard of people pouring whole pots of grease down their drains, bacon grease, all of that stuff. Well, if it gets hard in the pan when it cools, that's exactly what it does when it touches water. So we recommend putting very little down your drain, and we definitely recommend if you do have a garbage disposal, they're great. But remember, those are not for chopping up celery sticks as you push them through or anything like that. They're really for just clearing the small bits of food particles that you're putting in. And definitely no grease. Wipe that grease out and throw that into the trash can. Just always remember an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
That's awesome. Yeah, my dad would put the grease into some kind of container, lock it up, and and close it and throw it in the trash. Yeah, he would never put it down
Yeah.
the drain. So that's what you're saying. Just
Yeah.
don't put anything down
Well,
the drain.
look, I grew up in rural South Carolina, and you'd walk into a lot of homes when I was growing up, and look, it was pure lard. People would pour that bacon grease into a can, put a lid on the can, and when they needed something to fry up, they'd just grab a handful, pop it back into the frying pan, and go again. So that's
Hey,
good stuff. But
everything tastes good with bacon.
yeah, yeah. Look, if it's an artery clogger, it's going to clog your pipes too.
That's a good way to put it. You're right. You're right. That's a
Yeah,
good way to put it.
yeah.
Awesome. Here's the next question. Are drain cleaners from the store safe to use?
I would tell people to shy away from those, right? I mean, I get it. A lot of times you're going to mess more up with those, especially finishes on any metal. And sometimes it can actually cause damage to, a porcelain tub or, you definitely don't want to splatter. It tells you to wear gloves for a reason, right? So you've got to be careful with them. They can cause toxic gases, right? Because what's it doing? It's eating proteins and fats, solids that are in the drain. They've been making those for years and decades. I am not a fan of them. I don't want to sit here and dispute what a manufacturer says, but I can tell you that typically it is not a good fix to your issue. If you've got hair, the best thing to do is pull the drain stop up, get you a pair of fine needle nose pliers, and pull the hair out, right? Don't just glop some big chemical down the drain. Remember, most sewer systems are closed systems, meaning we're recycling that same water and it's coming back into somebody's house at some point in time. And yes, they go through a big filtration process and all that. But at the end of the day, we can't get rid of all the chemicals, right? So we have something going on now with water called PFAS, and that's chemicals in our water, right? So I'm not a big fan of people putting in chemicals of our water. I don't even like to hear people putting medication down the drains, right? Because those are, you just, the more that we put in, the more it's getting recycled and recycled, and we're just feeding the system with the same stuff. But I would tell people by and large, do not use those the drain chemicals that are out there. There's some really potent stuff out there that's real bad. They tell you to put those rubber gloves on for a reason. So if you do that, I have to tell you, make sure you're wearing those rubber gloves. A case in point, a friend of mine had his wedding band on when he was doing one of those one time, and it splashed up, and it created a serious chemical reaction between the metal, that chemical in his finger. And I mean, most guys that we just don't think about things like that. Just pour it in, glop it in. Well, it popped back up on his hand, and he had a bad reaction. So, look, just do it the old-fashioned way, which is the right way, the hard way, but it works the best way. So, again, I have a wife who has real long hair. My daughter has real long hair. I'm constantly in there once or every month and a half, pulling their hair out of the drains. And you can just hear and see how well it drains right after I get all that hair out. So, if you do that, more than likely your soap is not going to stick to anything on the way down, and you're just not going to have the clog. So I don't recommend those. And look, if you've got old galvanized or cast iron sewer pipes, definitely don't use those hard chemicals, because all you're doing is you're really going to start pitting. Where does the water sit? It sits at the bottom of that pipe. And all you're doing now is pitting that metal to continue to snag all the toilet paper, hair, anything coming down. It's just going to snag it, keep building it up for you to have a clog. So you think you're getting rid of the clog, you may be actually causing more if you've still got old cast iron, any metal galvanized or anything like that that comes in contact with it.
Why does my sink or shower drain slowly?
Number one cause in coastal South Carolina and even in Florence, South Carolina, which is our inland PD area, you're going to see it's mainly hair. You're going to have some soap that also builds up because the hair catches on it, as well as when you get to the coast, say you've got a second home or you have a beach house, definitely the sand getting into the bottom of your pipe, because the sand obviously weighs more. Don't get me wrong, the water flow is going to help take some of that away, but everybody's seen their feet after they've gotten off the beach or what have you, or if you've got a lot of dirt that you've dragged into your shower, it's just a lot for that water to move. So you get that build up. That is a little more difficult to remove than the hair. The hair is pretty easy because it usually gets caught right up at the drain. Okay. And the more hair that you get there, the more it just keeps piling on. Again, I recommend getting just a pair of needle nose pliers, pulling that hair out. You may break a little bit of it. Some may end up falling in, but when you pull all that hair out, you're really going to hear and see how well your drains start draining. But if you're on the beach, it may be a good idea to have somebody come jet those lines. We have residential jetters and they do a fantastic job. They're light. It's not like this big commercial unit we're pulling up to your house. Although for some homes that are larger, we may need that because of the amount of sand. But by and large, you're just going to be able to use a smaller residential jetter. And I highly recommend that. If you haven't ever had that done and you've got a beach house on the coast, definitely worth looking at investing in that. They really have some clean pipes.
That's good. When should I replace versus repair a faucet or fixture?
Yeah, well, doesn't that happen to everybody? You get the slow drip. There's a lot, believe it or not, there's a fair amount of rubber parts inside of your faucet, right? And so I always tell people, like I've been told, your water will always leave the trace of it being the issue. Okay, so when you look at the aerators, which is where the water pours out of a faucet, usually if you've got sediment in your water, that's where it's going to collect and build up and start looking kind of nasty, discolored, nasty. Again, bad water quality, right? The inside of your faucets where you've got little small springs and little rubber grommets, those deteriorate from poor water quality as well. Usually your chlorine just eats away at that rubber in there. And another good rule of thumb, honestly, is just look at the outside finish, right? If the outside finish is starting to deteriorate, more than likely the inside's not going to be that great either. But definitely, like when you're looking at your shower head inside of your shower, and you see just the gook coming out of the water holes there on your faucet, I mean, in your shower head, you've got water issues, water quality issues. And we try to preach that to our clients that, look, a simple water filtration system can eliminate a lot of your water issues and save you money on your appliances, right? So that's not even getting into washing your clothes in that same water, right? Which can deteriorate a drum after over time, where you may get some rusting going on in your washing machine. So, just water will always tell you the sign of what the problem is, because it's just a deteriorating factor. I mean, look, water shaped the entire world for a reason.
And it's interesting because a lot of times people don't realize is that's if it's doing that to plastics and metals, imagine what it's doing when you drink it. And I guess we
Yeah.
we have assets that could break it up, obviously, and for the most part, it's not harmful. But over time, it could weigh the inner pipes, wear out
Yeah,
the
well,
pipes.
look, I mean, a lot of ladies will tell you, I mean, when they get older, if you've been in chlorination for your entire life, like what happens to you after you go into a pool, like where really literally, just the chlorine smell is so bad, like you've been at a water park or something where they just douse the chlorine in there. I mean, the smell is so strong, right? Well, in our area in Myrtle Beach, we have pool levels of chlorination in our water. And over time, it makes your hair brittle. Women's hair falls out, men's hair is going to fall out as well. They're just not paying attention to it as much, or maybe they are. But women definitely are. And this is an easy way to really help their skin health, their hair health. Sometimes women even get they'll get welts from hot chlorinated water. We're breathing that in as well. So, water is that chlorination will really tell the tale.
Nice. All right, next question. How do I know if my water heater is going bad?
Well, it's gone bad if you have no hot water, typically. So I would definitely recommend, before you call a plumber, go check your circuit breaker, right? That's the first thing I would go check. Go check your circuit breaker, make sure that it hasn't tripped for some reason. And if it hasn't tripped and you have no hot water, then you're going to need to call a plumber more than likely, unless you're extremely handy. Remember, if you're going to mess with a water heater, right, in any form or fashion, we're talking about water and electricity, right? Two things that do not mix. So definitely get somebody who knows what they're doing. Make sure you've cut off the power. Now, if you're going to check your thermostat on there, which is inside of a tanked water heater, okay, we've got two types of water heaters here. We've got a tanked, and one way to tell that is, if you're getting hot and cold, then, or if you're not having hot water for very long, then you've got some water heater issues. You need to have somebody come out, give you a diagnostic. Maybe it's not that old of a heater and we can replace the thermostat, or maybe it's even a bad element, right? You don't have to always replace a water heater. It does have some parts that can be replaced. But again, because you're messing with 240 volts of electricity, we're not talking about something that's just going to pop you. We're talking about something that's going to lock you. And so you definitely want to know what you're doing. I do not recommend people working on that if they don't know what they're doing. You can YouTube it, but all it does is take one small mistake for you to really feel the power of the electricity going to your water heater. So, if you've got what we'll call hot and cold, or you just can't get it hot enough, then you've got water heater issues. It doesn't mean that it's bad or it's gone bad. But if it's about 10 years old, anywhere from 8 and up, then, maybe you should think about replacing it instead of repairing it. Just because, typically you're looking at a service call, you're looking at a thermostat or an element, which an element means we've got to drain the heater down some. So why not take that money and put it into a new heater that's going to last you 10 years? But, anything before 8 years, then that's a good question that you have to answer. But more than likely, it's okay to go ahead and repair the item depending on what kind of shape it's in. Has it ever been flushed? There's a couple of questions you probably want to ask yourself. Number one, has it ever been flushed? Meaning, do you have a lot of rust at the bottom of your tank, which again is going to lead to the demise of the interior tank of the water heater? And so definitely, last thought there is get a professional out there and figure that out. And if it's older than 8 years, you should really consider replacing the whole thing. I know that it can be repaired, but you're just buying a small amount of time with, with what could be a costly repair instead of just put that money into a new heater and get you a 10-year warranty heater, right? So that it's going to last. And if there's a problem, with Ben Franklin, we do have the best warranties and guarantees on those. And if you get a 10-year warranty and you've got a bad element or you've got a bad thermostat, then we're coming out to replace that.
That's good.
The one thing I didn't address there, Daniel, was if you have a tankless heat. So when you have a tankless heater and you're getting some cold water, there could be a couple of things happen, right? Depending on the ambient temperature outside, right? So somebody ran some hot water, cut the water off, the outside tankless water heater or even indoor tankless water heater shuts off. Okay. The water up by the faucet's going to still remain pretty hot. The water in between the top of the faucet all the way back out to the tankless may start cooling down depending on where it's at, where it's insulated at. Okay. So you turn the hot water on. Wow, it's hot right now. You get in the shower and all of a sudden it's cold because you've got still a whole line of cold water that hasn't been heated for a while coming back out at you. So we call those sandwiches, right? You've got a hot water sandwich basically, and people get real upset about that because it's hot, cold, and then the hot water comes again and they don't understand how that heater works. So if you're experiencing that, well, honestly, that's quite normal. Now, there's one way you can take care of that, and that is with a recirc pump, a recirculation pump. So that always keeps the hot water moving. So depending on what your level of comfort is, those are a great option. If you don't mind and understand how a tankless water heater works, then I wouldn't recommend getting a recirc pump. But if that sandwich bothers you, where you've got some hot and cold issues, definitely. It's a good comfort thing to have on your water heater. And most tankless water heaters it'll accept that, right? So those are real good to have. And if you just, the good thing about a tankless water heater is that they put up a code if there's a problem. So if for some reason you're not getting any water out of a tankless unit, right? They use gas as well as electricity. They have to have electricity because they're electronic in nature, not electric. They're more electronic. Most of them in our area for sure use gas. We do not recommend any electric tankless water heaters because of our ambient water temperature in this area being lower than what most people think. So there's only a very small window where those are they're good. So if you're only coming here during the summertime and our water temperature for in the ground is higher, it may be a good decision for you. But just realize as soon as it starts getting colder, you're not going to have the hot water that you probably would want in that shower or in that tub for sure. Even though it's instant demand, it can't produce it because the water coming in and out is going so fast that it just doesn't have time to heat it to where you want it. But we love tankless water heaters. They give you an endless supply. They're very good. But back to you have a problem, no hot water, go check the GFCI outlet that they're plugged into. They have a test and reset button on them. And so you want to make sure that you reset it, and maybe that'll be your issue. But if not, you should have a digital readout somewhere like an LED screen that's going to give that may be flagging a code. If that's the case, we can help you with any Rinnai heater and we can help you with any Navian heater as well. We love Navian because of their great warranties, but we can help with Rinnai. We install a lot of Rinnais and we install a lot of Navians as well. So just give us a call and we can come help diagnose that.
Do you work on any other water heaters other than those?
Yeah, and look, we'll work on any. Between those two, I would say that's probably 80% of the market share, especially around here. We just don't see a lot of the other brand names that are here. They came out a little later, and a lot of plumbers like the two brands that I just mentioned. You know, that's what we're used to. So, and look again, back to warranties. That's why we love Navy. I mean, they have a 15-year warranty on the heat exchangers, and that's actually what's heating the water up. And that's the most expensive parts in there because typically they're stainless steel. And those also need annual maintenances as well.
Wow. Thank you for that. Why do I run out of hot water so fast?
Okay, so more than likely you have a tanked unit, right? Those usually come in 30-gallon, 40-gallon, 50-gallon now. Okay. The old style was an 80-gallon. Federal government came out a few years ago and said no more residential 80 gallons. You can still get those in a light commercial unit. The price is a lot more than they used to be when they sold or allowed us to install 80s for residential. What we're finding now is that we can turn up the temperature on a standard 50-gallon and we can bleed cold water in there, helping prolong the water temperature. But it's a 50-gallon at the end of the day. We can put in a valve that's going to allow that water to blend a little better, extend the life of the water, the hot water that you have. The great thing about the 80s were, you know, it was made for the American family of four, two-bath house, and you had four people who were going to take a shower. Usually, the good old dad had the last little bit of hot water, and then ended up with cold. But it gave the tank enough time for a recovery, right? So it wasn't crazy cold, like just straight cold water. It would just be a warmer shower. So you saw a lot of federal regulations, and look, and those federal regulations are coming again. By the year of 2030, they want everybody to be able to accommodate any new construction is going to have to accommodate what they call a hybrid heater. And a hybrid heater basically uses the same technology as what we have in a lot of the southern states of the United States, or what we call heat pumps, where the heat is drawn out of the air. It uses that to then heat your water. Recovery time. Now, those also still have elements, but they are extremely energy efficient. Some people even use them to heat. The problem is when they use them to heat, you also have the same hot air in the summertime. They need a lot of airway. But when back to the original question, I can easily get sidetracked with those hybrids, but back to that. So, your 50-gallon, which is real popular in the Myrtle Beach area. If you're running out of hot water, give us a call. They make tank boosters. We've got mixing valves that we can use just to help you out and try to get you as much hot water when you're using it as possible. But there's always, again, the light commercial 80-gallon if that's not enough. And if you have gas, then I definitely recommend let's look at a tankless water heater. Then it's endless. You can't ever run out of hot water. And again, those are nice. Just being honest, those are nice,
Right on.
especially if you have teenagers.
Yeah, they start singing in the shower for like 30 minutes and use I don't know how many gallons of
Well,
water.
here's the thing. You can put a timer on some of those things just so that they
Oh,
can't
okay.
use it either, other than dad going, get out of the shower.
Oh
It still
yeah.
costs money to run gas. So,
Yeah, they turn into a spa, like the steam and the hot on the back.
oh, yeah. Yeah. Heck yeah. Endless supply
Oh yeah. Next question here. How often should I flush or maintain my water heater?
annually. Annually. It's one of those maintenance things, right? So, and look, you can flush your tanked water heater out with no problem. Make sure you know what you're doing there, because sometimes you can actually implode the tank, right? So in other words, the water's running out, but you don't have any more water coming in, so that the tank doesn't have big air pocket, sucks in, and really you just lost your water heater when that happens, right? So there is a method to doing that, but you need to do it annually. It will definitely extend the life of your water heater. Again, 10 years, that's not uncommon, but you got to start it off, year after year after year, where you're draining that down. And really, maintenance wise, on a tanked unit, that's what you do. On a tankless unit, you definitely want to have those serviced. If you don't get that serviced every year, you should definitely have it flushed at a minimum of every year. For optimum, you should definitely have it serviced as well. Manufacturers recommend the service. And look, you're talking about an expensive piece of equipment when you're talking about a tankless water heater. It's well worth the expense to have it serviced. That way it's running efficient. It's just like a car. I mean, but this thing uses gas, water, and electricity, right? Three very, important aspects to the integrity of that heater, all of which can cause damage to it. There's some electricity going into it, minimal again, just mainly for your electronic codes and then figuring out if there's a problem. But the gas, right? So you've got gas igniters in there that need to be cleaned, just like you would like a gas fireplace, right? You're usually going to have that serviced every year. A tankless water heater is getting a lot more use than a fireplace around in these areas, especially. So we usually run a special on flushing, and we do run specials on actually servicing the unit, which I highly recommend, just so you have optimal performance on that expensive piece of equipment.
Right on. Here is another question. If I'm buying home, what plumbing issues should I look for?
Oh man, look, that's a great question, and I can really relate to that because my son and daughter have homes, and that was one of the first things I wanted to definitely check. I wanted to check, number one, the age of the water heater, right? Knowing that water heaters have typically an 8 to 10, maybe 11-year lifespan, right? How old is the water heater? Does it have any rust on the outside? How does it look, right? And I'm just eyeballing it. How does it look? So all water heaters have a code on them. It's by manufacturer. Google, see how old that water heater is, right? That's an expensive thing to miss during a home inspection. Typically, you're going to see your home inspector say, hey, the water heater looks good. They're going to see the temperature coming out of a faucet somewhere and say it's delivering that water heater. But what if the water heater's 9 years old, right? You may be coming up to another expense in a year, maybe 2 years. Hopefully you get that out of it, right? So definitely checking the water heater. I'm going to flush and I'm going to run water while I'm there, okay? I'm going to make sure that I'm not having any backups or clogs. A lot of people, they may overlook the fact that, hey, I just had that thing cleaned out, whatever. I'm going to make sure that I've got good flow of water. I'm probably, just being transparent, I'm probably not going to have a plumber come out, run a camera down the line or anything. But I'm going to run water and I'm going to flush the all the commodes, and I'm turning on faucets and I'm checking all of that. And the other thing that most people overlook is the cutoffs. Okay. So when I say what a cutoff is, that's right beside your toilet. That's what feeds your toilet. It's what feeds all of your faucets in the house. Now, you don't have access to those for the tub or shower, but you do have access at all the other points where you've got a sink. Okay. How old are those, right? Will they turn off? Because if you've got to get all those replaced because they're 25 years old and they're original to the house, in an earlier episode, you and I were talking about the rubber inside of plumbing parts deteriorating from chlorine, right? Well, the same thing happens with cutoffs, right? Unless they look like they're new and they've just been replaced. I would definitely question that, right? That's a good thing to look at, because let's say you do have a leak somewhere, right? And you go to turn it off. Well, guess what? It doesn't turn off. And so now you're running out to the street. Hopefully you can find where your meter is so that you can turn the water off. But the time it takes for you to get from that bathroom to where the cutoff is at the street could be, could be a very expensive little run because the amount of water that comes out with you being able to cut it off is a lot. So I would be checking those cutoffs. I'm not saying that the homeowners who are selling the house are going to do anything about it, but you need to know that that's probably something you're going to need to have done in the near future just for your own peace of mind. And quite honestly, that's another one of those things that insurance companies, that's probably, beyond a washing machine hose flooding a house. Those cutoffs are big as well.